I know that I carry a lot of like scars and baggage from my experiences with white men. My experiences being white being like the default.
Yeah.
And almost when I did come into interaction with other like Asian men, it was almost like that thing of like brotherizing them and being like, oh, I've never dated an Asian guy because the only Asian guys I've come into contact with has been majority like family or close family friends.
Do you think there was some internalized prejudice there?
Yeah, definitely. When we were growing up, like back in, way back when, it was like the most desirable thing was like skinny white indie boys, like Tumblr era.
2010.
Yeah. Which was like a time.
The Kooks, the Pigeon Detectives, the Indie Cindy and the Hoxton Hero.
Bombay Bicycle Club. Yeah. Which was, and I think that it was that lens of desirability. But now it's not so much like that. It's really multicultural. Hi everybody, welcome to Eastern Honeys. Today we're going to have a really honest conversation about some very important topics.
So earlier in the season we unpacked male Asian identity, masculinity, dating as an Asian man, and we thought, why not, as our experiences being raised in the UK as Asian and Filipino women, speak on those experiences.
And just a little trigger warning to our audience, some of these topics may hit hard / hit home a bit. Just a little warning.
Let's kick it off.
Melissa, we have had so many transparent, raw and honest conversations about the topic of interracial dating, fetishization, objectification in our friendship these past however many years it's been. Can you share your experiences?
When you are Asian, speaking specifically Southeast Asian in the UK, maybe East Asian to an extent, but Southeast Asian bodies, the exoticized, brown, submissive woman is such a huge trope. Time and time again, that kind of stereotype is embedded, particularly in the minds of older English people. In the 70s, 80s, there was this Filipino mail-order brides narrative that boomed, especially with newspapers, the internet. I think that holds a place in the British thinking and attitudes towards Asian women. So while Asian men have always been emasculated, Asian women have always been fetishized. And we've seen that again and again in the US and in the UK with Vietnamese bodies being fetishized during the war, with comfort women in Japan.
World War II.
Exactly. And so this hangover from that thinking has bled into, I think, growing up, the way we experienced being an Asian woman in the UK.
Yeah. And dating specifically also.
Dating specifically, the way we had interactions were approached by people of the opposite sex or gender. In terms of growing up, I don't know about you, but I had the chubby, hairy, dumpling stage before having my eventual glow up and being like, oh my gosh, I'm becoming a woman. And as I was becoming a woman, quote unquote.
Hashtag becoming a woman.
Hashtag becoming a woman.
Work.
Brittany. I'm not a girl. Not yet a woman. I remember starting to attract attention. And I don't know if this is symbolic of growing up in ends, where men are so much more thirsty and open to approaching on the street, catcalling, all of these things. I think from then, being a young, nubile Asian body, right?
Nubile, okay.
Attracted a very strange bag of reactions, which we can unpack for sure. But that's just my general take on growing up Asian.
Unwanted
female.
attention.
Unwanted attention, always through a sexual lens. And I think some of my earliest instances, being approached, it would be like, I remember being in Notting Hill Carnival and everyone would be like, look at this little Chinese thing.
Yeah, I got that a lot. China wine, I got that.
Wine.
Yeah.
But then also, they're like, oi, where are you from? And are you mixed? I'm like, if I tell them where I'm from, they're like, oh, do you speak Spanish? Yeah. Spanish bum, but like Asian face. And it's always fetishizing a woman's body in relation to the most stereotypical aspects of their heritage and never seeing the person inside.
Of course.
So that was my experience. And even dating people from other ethnicities or backgrounds, I just remember there being a complete lack of awareness or understanding around the Philippines.
Yeah.
You Thai, are you Chinese? It's ignorance, but it's something that, I don't know, was pervasive when we were growing up, before all the Twitter, before Insta, before social media making people more aware.
And before the Filipino was more visible.
Exactly.
In spaces generally.
100. Just seeing in the Filipino community the amount of white, old Englishmen with younger Filipino wives who they've met and brought over or met here is just so disproportionate to the flip.
Of course.
Again, I think that is a narrative somewhat rooted in truth, but it is legions of Western men who go over there for the express purpose of finding a nice, submissive, housekeeping, young, sexy wife that they might otherwise not have been able to obtain in the UK. I know we've discussed your gender identity and queerness and exploration of that in recent years, but growing up through childhood, coming here, through teenage years, through to university, I feel like university is when we really started to unpack this stuff. What has been your experience with being received sexually and in a romantic sense as an Asian female?
My friend Roxanne Peters has this amazing quote that she's written in her dissertation, and she shares something about always existing in liminal spaces. And that is something I really resonate with growing up and just generally. So I grew up in a very white middle-class neighbourhood in East Finchley. But then I went to school in Hendon. I went to secondary school in Hendon, which was largely black and brown. In my class, there was like one white person. I never felt desired in either of those spaces because I always felt too brown for the white gaze, and then in brown spaces, almost too white because I grew up in like a middle-class environment.
Really?
So this is why I am really good at code switching, and I know you are also. We can code switch between cultures and spaces and people. In terms of a dating lens, I just always felt maybe just like not cute. And I never felt really that I vibed with any people in my vicinity. It's just like there was just a lack of connection there. And I was a pretty late bloomer. I was very bookish. Fast forward, when I went to uni, I really grew into myself and had more of a multicultural friendship group. My uni was predominantly white, and then I had my crew, which was more mixed. But then I think that's when the dating aspect really came into play as I grew into myself and into my looks and confidence. At uni and at that time, it was mostly dating white men, white boys. I know that I carry a lot of scars and baggage from my experiences with white men. My experiences being white being the default.
Yeah.
And almost when I did come into interaction with other Asian men, it was almost that thing of brotherising them and being oh, I've never dated an Asian guy because the only Asian guys I've come into contact with has been majority family or close family friends.
Do you think there was some internalized prejudice there?
Yeah, definitely. When we were growing up, back in, way back when, it was like the most desirable thing was like skinny white indie boys, like Tumblr era.
2010.
Yeah. Which was like a time.
The Kooks, the Pigeon Detectives, the Indie Cindy and the Hoxton Hero.
Bombay Bicycle Club. Yeah. Which was, and I think that it was that lens of desirability. But now it's not so much like that. It's really multicultural. But also there's a preface to say, you heard it here first, I have not only dated white men, I've dated a spectrum of colours.
Me too.
Yeah. But I think those dating experiences probably hold the most scars.
Was there ever an instance where you were dating someone that, looking back, you can see was very racially coded, that you did not unpack or understand at the time? An instance.
An instance. Which instance do I draw from specifically?
From which trauma do I draw?
Yeah, which well of trauma shall I draw my water from? I dated this guy at uni. He was like a little ginger white boy.
Wow.
I don't know why, looking back in my grand old age of 30-something, that I, felt some kind of way about this guy. His dating history, like at uni, was all very, like, red flag. It was like very much, the exotic brown baddies.
Okay.
He used to take all the girlies to this Ghibli-inspired... Triggered. The crew is triggered right now. This Ghibli-inspired cafe.
It is.
And then, I know. And now... Yeah, so the Ghibli-inspired cafe was a red flag. There was an instance when he was like, "Oh, I'm John Lennon, you're Yoko Ono."
Wrong Asian.
Red flag too. And also, I'm the wrong Asian. I'm flip-flop Asian, not Memoirs of a Geisha Asian.
Hear it. Written by a white man.
Which, Arthur Golden. And a friend or a foe? A friend or a foe? Leave your responses in comments. Love the film, though. Love the film.
Yeah, although she's Chinese.
Although she is Chinese, not Japanese. Yeah, the Ghibli cafe, the Yoko Ono comment, and I think the pervasive pursuing of Asian baddies.
Regardless of their actual personality.
Not even. They were like amazing, intelligent women. It was just the Asian baddies, and also not specified of where Asian. It was just like flavor.
Unspecified Asian.
If they were flavoursome, he would be interested. Yeah, and I'm not sure why I pursued this man, but we grow and we heal and we learn.
I see.
Which is the most important bit.
I see.
So Melissa, now I've unpacked my trauma.
Yeah.
I'm going to flip it back to you. I'm going to flip it and reverse it. What is your most traumatizing dating experience?
The most recent one I'm just going to pull from, which we briefly chatted about. Another white ginger guy from uni. We got with each other in the SU during a night out. Facebook message pinged the next day. He was like, "Do you want to go to the pub?" I was like, "Oh yeah, sure." At the time, I worked at Nike Town in Oxford Circus.
During Mel's Swaggerpino era.
2013, I had on Jordan 5s. I was in my black pleather bomber era. I had black leather skinnies. And it was bad. This is when contouring had just hit YouTube.
Hit the streets.
Yeah, I was going to go to a shift later that night, so I was at swaggerpino.com. And I went to the pub. We sit down. He's like, "I've ordered you a cider." Start chatting. Bear in mind, we're on exactly the same course. We start talking about books we love, our grades. And then there's a bit of a lull in conversation. And he's like, with his beer, he's like, "This is funny, isn't it?" And I was like, "What's funny?" And he was like, it's quite absurd. And I was like, "What's absurd?" Because I just didn't understand. And he's like, "Well, me being me, you being you." And I was like, "But what do you mean, bleep?" And he was like, "Well, I went to boarding school, so I usually date preppy blonde boarding school girls. And then, not really girls like you." And I was like, "What do you mean girls like me?" And then he was like, "Well, look at your shoes. You obviously only date black guys." And I was like, on so many levels to unpack this.
Yeah, that's like loaded.
So loaded. And again, I didn't have the vocabulary or the like race inclusion thinking to unpack this at the time. Looking back, I'm like, number one, girls like you others me immediately. There's the class comment embedded in I only date preppy blonde boarding school girls. And then there's the second part, which is girls like you, which is immediately othering, as though he's just dating me for an exciting, spicy experience that is so not of the norm and like ridiculous. And then third is the part where the cultural coding of you wear a certain type of shoe, therefore you have a sexual vetted interest in a certain demographic of people. And all of that, I think, speaks to his complete privilege as a white male who can just say shit without thinking. And secondly, the complete lack of respect to who he was speaking to as a human being. Because I mean, you would get so... those were like crimson flags screaming for attention.
The scarlet letter.
It was a scarlet letter. It was a howler in the fucking Great Hall over breakfast.
I'm so sorry to bring in J.K. Rowling in this, but...
Not a friend of the pod.
Not a friend of
But we love Hazard P.
Unfortunately. We love you, Cho Chan.
We love Cho. Manifest Katie Leung, join us.
The OG Eastern Honey.
The OG Eastern Honey. Yeah. So... that is one of the most probably traumatic experiences because I was confused. This guy had chosen to come to a London university in the fucking deepest of ends in Deptford. And for someone to say that is just so exposing.
It is exposing.
It's like, thank you. Now I'm like, thank you for showing me who you are. Yeah. I will gladly disconnect and never speak with you again.
The caucasity.
The caucasity. Yeah. And I just worry about the experiences of other Asian women in this country or otherwise where they are the minority who deal with this kind of like stuff all the time, feel gaslit because they feel some type of way but don't understand why. It's not you, it's them, okay?
That anecdote was loaded in Microaggressions.
Yes.
Speaking of microaggressions, can you share with us some that you've experienced in the workplace? Because I can. The UK workplace is like just filled with them.
I left my last job because of microaggressions. Okay. And they're not even just in the workplace, they're every day. Like they're in your friendship groups. They're at birthday parties and hen dos and
as you live your life,
showers. And you're just... Basically, I was the only woman of colour in an office of 12. Yeah, tiring immediately. Yeah. And they hired this white HR woman, and I'm an advocate. I will always use my voice to speak up, to advocate for other people, to ask for better pay, to ask for better conditions. I am never going to be a wallflower, and people know that when they hire me. Yeah. Like, when I have an interview, that is the expectation. Like, I can code switch, I can have the voice and the softness, but I will come in hard, and you have to be able to do that in a corporate professional space.
Advocate for yourself.
Exactly. It takes so much energy, courage, and a lot of overcoming of fear and doubt to actually use your voice in those spaces.
Especially being the only one.
When they are stacked against you, yeah, and when you have no one else to back you. One instance is this HR Karen pulled me into a room. One of our clients at the time had just pulled a whole bunch of work we'd spent a year working on.
Right.
And I was like, that is a nightmare. Oh God, all right, like, we'll pull through it, guys. Karen pulls me into a room and she's like, Mel, I don't know how to say this, right? But you have a really big personality. And I was like, okay. And she was like, you've got a really big personality and you're a very influential person. And I think sometimes the things you say in the room can be like taken quite negatively. So I need you to just tone it down. And I was like confused because all my other colleagues, my white male counterpart, shout out to you, friend of the pod, ally, he was just like, this is fucking shit, this is a nightmare, oh God. Like everyone was cussing, swearing, being aggressive. But it's me, the one
anomaly,
a woman of colour, she's telling me I'm aggressive, I need to tone it down. And I felt so triggered and stressed out, I just like disengaged from that and then picked up later on an email. And I think that is something that men just don't historically have to deal with in a workplace.
Men don't get minimised.
Men do not get
Especially
minimised, especially that. But then for a white woman to sit in a room and tell me about myself as a person of colour and bring in this aggression word,
which is pervasive in the discourse within black and brown women.
Angry brown woman discourse is so, it's tired.
Yeah, it's tired.
Don't bring it up. And I'm like, if you had any formal HR or D&I training, you would know. And when she first joined, she was like, I'd love everyone to recommend training. And I was like, I think D&I training is really important. And she was like, well, we'll see what we've got in the budget. Don't immediately, it's tiring. And another instance, this is a more clear example of a microaggression just in everyday life. I went to get bubble tea with a British-Chinese freelancer. Shout out Chris Luck, amazing animator, friend of the pod. I went to get bubble tea with him and my colleague, who is a white male, same white guy, same ally. And we were sipping our bubble tea and my white male CEO comes in, ignoring me and Chris, i.e. the two Asians sipping bubble tea, which hails from Taiwan, by the way. He looks at Ollie and scrunches up his face and he's like, ugh, is that weird tapioca, like, bubble stuff? My daughter loves that. Ugh, it looks disgusting. I could never. And my friend Ollie was like, well, it's actually quite nice. Yeah. Really like it. And he was like, ugh, it looks atrocious. At which point, Chris and I were like, bombastic side-eye. The caucasity stems from a place of privilege and always being the centre of the conversation. They literally cannot function when they are not centre of the conversation. So, yeah, how about you?
My experience being an Asian person in the workplace, especially in fashion, is that of a bittersweet tale.
A tale I know well.
Yeah.
Through
violin. I entered the workplace like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
She was the award-winning stylist, future stylist of the year.
I was British Fashion Council Stylist of Tomorrow.
Okay.
I won the competition. Thank you, BFC. I won an internship to Harrods Magazine. So I was very fortunate enough to walk into a paid internship after I graduated uni. And then my first job was at a photo studio. I was a shoot assistant and I was the only Asian person there. I remember I'm very used to like being in white settings because of where I grew up. But it was just those constant microaggressions that you just face on a daily basis being an Asian person. And to me, what was most prevalent was this constant, the models of colour were always in front of the camera, but then the crew was, all white. And I've always felt some type of way about that because to me it's box ticking. Yeah. And if you're going to feature people of colour like in front of the lens, then I feel like you should also include people of colour behind for authenticity, for integrity, for all of that good stuff. So I remember the environment just always being quite isolating and there was always constant like comments. I mean, the canon event of my career really is when I progressed up the ladder and joined another photo studio. And I joined this workplace because of how diverse it seemed. But unfortunately, that was not the case behind closed doors. And I feel that is where I carry the majority of my workplace wounds. Okay. Me being who I am, like, very outspoken and just I consistently fight for what is right. Yeah. Like perhaps to the detriment of my career.
Dying on hills alone.
I'm dying on this hill, but also like, it's sunny up there, so it's all good. Yeah. I just remember always just calling out so much shit all the time on a daily basis. I was on set once and it was like a crew, like an all-white crew, and then the hairstylist. We were like fixing the model and then the hairstylist. Something was mentioned about going on holiday in Asia. And I think I had said something and the hairstylist was like, oh, like, don't your people eat dog on set? And then it's a full crew, some who I regarded as friends. No one said anything. No one no one backed me.
That's humiliating.
It is humiliating, but it's also I'm like we're used to it. The worst slur I've ever encountered was "I'm gonna punch you back to China," which was also the worst and best because, like, girl, I do not look Chinese.
How did you handle the dog eating comment?
He was never booked again. Quite frankly, he was never booked again. The most hilarious thing about it is that I had helped this man make these little origami paper cranes for his wedding.
Origami?
Yeah, like it was lunchtime and like he'd brought in all this paper that he was going to decorate his wedding reception in, and these origami cranes. And I know how to, fold them, being like an Asian girly. And I was just helping him fold that, and I was just like, what's the actual
Why are you doing free fucking labour for
Yeah,
this
also
for?
that. Yeah, and he made a joke about that also. That is like one instance. But I think like the reason why I left that workplace was I complained to HR. I complained to HR about all these constant attacks. And it just got too much entering a workplace where I was just constantly like under siege from all of these comments.
Yeah. But it takes a toll emotionally, mentally, psychologically.
For sure. And there was an instance where, like we discussed earlier on in the pod about an email about model casting, and this head of department was just like, this model is too brown and exotic to be featured on the site. And then I was just like, you can't say that. He retorted with, I didn't mean it in an ignorant way, so therefore it's not offensive. And I was like, okay, like I'm just so tired of doing this all the time. And then ultimately, after I complained to HR about all these building traumas, the people that I thought were my friends in the studios, so the people I complained about, which were older white men, people in positions of power, men that should know better in their grand old age, they just stopped talking to me. They stopped talking to me, they froze me out. It's a tiny studio, and ultimately I was just like, I can't do this on a daily basis. This is not good for my mental health. Like, it's not good for anyone. And so ultimately I left. And I am better because of it. And yeah, I don't know. Now I just be. Now, when that shit happened, I got the clap back. Yeah. I'm done with it. I washed my hands of it.
I'm happy for you.
Thank you.
I think that's also a massive driver for why both of us want to be freelance and carve our own careers and spaces and build our own tables because of the exhaustion of coming from a world that has had to deal with certain people in positions of power. But specifically being a person of colour in a UK workplace, in a non-inclusive UK workplace, continues to be, I think, possibly the most damaging thing for a person's mental health, because you rely on this source for income. You rely on this source to pay your bills, to pay your rent, transport, travel, everything. And so, like, again, like, culturally, biting off the hand that feeds you is just not done. No. And it's so much easier than to just repress, not unpack, and keep on keeping on.
Head down and get on with it.
100%. And we're in positions of privilege as Filipinos who are British, who are nationalised as British, who have options and safety nets and plan Bs. Yep. Whereas if you're a domestic helper or an OFW or a migrant worker in unfavourable conditions who's come to the UK with no one to back you, you are never going to complain. And there's this horrible statistic from the Home Office or like migrant workers department of the government, where it's like 50% of, I can't remember the exact statistics, but basically behind closed doors, domestic helpers work with private employers, and the amount of rape, like passport burning, abuse, physical abuse, slavery, like modern slavery that goes down behind closed doors is so high.
Yeah.
And Filipinos are one of the largest demographic groups of those domestic helpers. So it stands to reason that we're one of the largest abused groups in the country. And that's why there's always headlines and investigative pieces about Filipino women like fleeing their abusive employers. It's the same story in loads of other countries and territories, but again, to the point on like representation in the UK and in the media, all the headlines we see are like the weak injured Filipino woman. It's never like an amazing tale.
Yeah, it's never celebratory.
It's never a celebration unless it's like the royal family celebrating Filipino nurses.
Yeah, or Miss Universe.
Or Miss Universe. there's either the caregiver or the beauty queen.
Yeah.
And there's no in between.
No in between.
And there's this fantastic piece, I can't remember her name, that she's Filipino-Australian. She wrote a piece on beauty pageants in the Philippines, kind of like image laundering the Philippines.
Yeah.
So we have the like OFW woman or nurse that is sent abroad, who's like a caregiver. We have the gorgeous, stunning, radiant Miss Philippines. Both of them uplift the image of the Philippines globally. But then actually all of this serves to help mask the very patriarchal, masculine systems of power and corruption. But to a Western lens, all that we see are those two binaries of women. So people like me and you, people like the crew, all of us,
where do we fit in?
the spectrum of representation is not giving. And I just think, yeah, that's a narrative that needs to be changed.
Speaking on the two tropes of the beauty queen or the overseas worker and the beauty standards from those two tropes, do you have any anecdotes about beauty standards, Asian beauty standards?
When I had my identity crisis at 21,
As we all do. As we all do weekly.
I moved to Manila. I reverse migrated to take on an internship in film and media out in the Philippines. And I don't know if the people know this, but I had a coconut oil brand named Virginati, which was to elevate Filipino coconut farmers, empower the minority, embrace natural skincare, etc. That all started because when I was working in the Philippines, I went to a drugstore, I think it was like Watson's, Mercury, pounded the pavements. I did not find a single moisturizer without whitening agent in it. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I don't want to be whiter. It had, I don't know, stuff that bleaches your skin in it too. So I asked a worker, I was like, do you have anything without whitening agent? She was like, wala po ma'am, how about coconut oil? So I started using coconut oil every single day and it became part of my routine. So much so to the point where I was like, this is amazing, I want to bring this to the UK. But running it back, when I brought this up to people, for example, in like friends over there, they were like, oh yeah, like people get glutathione injections all the time. And I was like, what's that? And they were like, oh, it's a skin whitening injection. And I was like, how does it make you whiter? And they said, oh, it like stops a function of the liver. So your body literally turns whiter and gives you jaundice. And I was like, what the F? Maybe like 89% of the indigenous population is dark skin, brown skin. You are morena, you're putting very white-skinned mestizas and chinitas on billboards and you're peddling skin whitening injections on billboards as you drive down highways. To this day. I know I'm speaking, again, as a position of privilege, as like a Westerner, as a British Filipino, and also someone of mixed heritage. But I didn't understand all of this colorism that came into play until moving there. But it's funny because my mum's side is predominantly Spanish. Everyone is like super light skinned, super white. I have two cousins in the US on that side who are like blonde.
Wow.
Whereas my dad's side are from the province, typically browner. I remember when I would go to the province, they would be like, oh, you're so beautiful. You're so, Miss Universe. Like, and then I would go to my family in Manila and they'd be like, oh, you're so tan, you're so morena. And it's really hard being caught in these two worlds where people are constantly judging you on face value. I'm not even dark skinned, but it's had so many instances, even in the workplace, where they're like, you'd be really beautiful if you stayed out of the sun. Or like people saying, oh, you should apply for modelling. Morena's very in fashion now. Just
like it's a
fad. Like it's a fad.
Yeah.
So those are my personal experiences, and there are so many more. And I know it all comes from a place of good intention, but that is so coloured through a really complex, coloured lens of like colonial mentality. White is privilege, like closeness to the West is best. Yeah, how about you? What are your experiences with like colorism and whiteness?
I have had many experiences with that. What I will share is not an anecdote from myself, but an anecdote of my mum's. She is a gorgeous 5'8" morena, and she's curvier than your average Filipino. She's of the boomer generation. So when she was growing up in the Philippines, the beauty standards from that day were even more Western. She felt like ugly. She felt like an ugly duckling because she didn't fit into those Western tropes of beauty standards. So
Which is wild because your mother is stunning. She's stunning.
She's shared with me in the past that she was anorexic because of it, because she was starving herself to fit these Western ideals. She wanted to become a flight attendant and she couldn't do that because of her hip measurements. And she was too tall, and the airline wanted to hire, that Cathay Pacific honey, the ones that win Miss Universe. That was their trope, hiring within those airlines. And I know that really damaged her. And now moving here, and in this day and age, as in this generation, the beauty standards are so inclusive and there's so much more diversity. She's really grown into her confidence, grown into herself. I love that for her. I love how, yes, these ideals are still carried through and are still very prevalent within the narrative of beauty standards. But I think we've hit a time.
Yes.
Because of maybe the internet, more education, more conversation, and more awareness in spaces like this. It is a different time, and it's more celebratory.
Yeah, Asia Jackson, she had her campaign, #Magandang Morengs. You've got Chelsea Manalo, Black Filipino, winning Miss Universe Philippines 2024. Alexi Brooks, Miss Iloilo. You've got artists like her and Saweetie in the spotlight.
Really championing. Being mixed race.
Being mixed. Well. Also Cassie, our hearts are with you.
The
OG. So many. Visible.
Yeah, and I'm so happy we're in this space for us.
Yeah. In terms of growing up as an Asian woman in the UK, I know we spoke briefly on being in all white spaces. So you said you had a very middle class upbringing. I too was surrounded by white friends in high school specifically, even though I had a very diverse, inclusive set of friends at primary. What is your experience of being the token Asian friend?
I think I'm very fortunate to have my school friends as allies, and they they do the most, they're in it for the culture. But there was just, growing up, especially in secondary school, there was just always comments. I remember wearing this Jack Wills hoodie once, and a guy in our friendship group from back in the day was like, "Oh, how many houses did you have to clean to afford that hoodie?"
For Jack Wills?
Yeah, for Jack Wills.
Are you joking?
And I remember being in a public, and in our friendship group, and I was just whoa. And I just really just shut down and just kind of brushed it off I was 15, 16. And that will always stay with me.
He said that?
Yeah, he said that.
Who is he?
He's redundant.
Call him out.
No, he's relevant. Seriously, he's irrelevant. But it was just always comments like that. And I just really shut down and internalized a lot of those things. But I think now, as I'm more confident, I'm more educated, I have life experience under my belt.
She's equipped.
I'm equipped. And at this point in my life, energy attracts energy.
Yeah.
I only have good people in my corner, people that get it, people who will stand up for you if something goes down. Yeah. And I'm just really grateful and blessed to be at this point when I don't take it from anyone. I'm you are irrelevant. Seriously, you're irrelevant. So, Melissa, how does it feel to be the token Asian friend?
I really dislike the term token Asian. I really dislike it because it implies that someone is there as a box check rather than as a human individual with value to add to a group, to a friendship, etc. I was the token Asian friend in so many friendship groups. You know how you have subsets, especially in London. You have your party group, you have your school group, you have your uni group, and I was always the token Asian. I remember when we were about 13, my best friend at the time, she would just call me Asian. like not even my name. She'd be like, Asian.
A rally call.
But I called her Welsh. So like, is that okay? Not sure. So I've retained my core group of female friends from high school who are now close friends that I see regularly. But as they get more in their bubble, as they get, lean more into their like married, having babies, privileged, middle class existences, they are less and less checked in with like London life where we grew up. And I've found that I've had to always be the one to like bring in my emotional feelings, raise the recent like race riots, for example, for them to even kind of like ask me how I'm doing, which can feel tiring. Other people check in, but sometimes I've found that I've had to like do the work, and it's making me feel like I'm pulling away from that a little bit now, like from friends that don't check in automatically, because it shows you like who cares, who doesn't. I think for a while there's, especially like as a teenager when you are the token Asian friend, there's a lot of things that just go by. I did have a group of Asian friends at school, but they were all monoracial. Basically, they were like the more bookish types, very smart, very clever, very good at maths, science, what have you. And I do remember an instance in one of our physics lessons. I came in and it was in sixth form where we could wear what we want. And I always like makeup, miniskirt, that H&M bodycon, swagapino. I came in and sat down and they like whispered to each other and laughed, and they were like, you look like the Asian bimbo from the Fly Like a G6 video.
Oh, damn.
I didn't know how to feel because I felt othered by the Asian group. And I wasn't sure if it was a backwards compliment, but by virtue of calling me a bimbo, I was like, are you saying I'm too westernized for you? Are you, and I didn't feel included in that space either. But also there were like half Japanese girls in my class. But again, it's like they seemed fancy Asian and I seemed flip-flop Asian. And I don't think that is something that is spoken about enough either.
Yeah, there's a distinction.
There is a clear distinction. I think as I've gotten older, like you say, more wisdom under the belt, more experiences, more understanding, more empowerment of self and others around me, I'm so much better able to recognize those situations. To end on a note of celebration and joy, what do you love about being a British Asian woman and specifically a Filipina person in the UK?
I love being the underdog. As Normani says in her recent single, Candy Paint, I can make something out of nothing. Like, I can pull it out the bag. Being Filipino means having fewer resources, but having the self-confidence, the ingenuity, the creativity to think outside of the box and make it work. And that is what I love about being not just British Filipino, but just being of the Filipino diaspora as a whole. The Pinoy pride is real. The Pinoy pride has arrived, and the Pinoy pride is here to stay.
Yeah.
What is your favourite thing, Melissa, about being British Filipino?
My favourite thing, I echo all of your sentiments, but my favourite thing is probably belonging to this diaspora. You cannot beat it. Anyone who becomes an honorary Filipino and is pulled into this crazy wide web of Philippine diaspora it's just so rich. It's so giving. It's so generous. It's so full of laughter, love, self-expression, creativity, art, joy, the celebration of migration patterns across the world, the beautiful new blend of cultures that spring up from these pockets of Philippine diaspora around the world, where we get to share and engage and have new, just diversity of thought in the global Philippine mindset is so exciting. I personally love it because it's allowed me to enter into different worlds, be held and explore these gorgeous areas of life that I feel so lucky to experience, that I know so many people don't get to when they are not from multiple places. And the fact it means we can do stuff like this, like Eastern Honeys, and connect not just with the Philippine diaspora as well, but also
the wider ESCA
community, and hear how our experiences are similar and how they differ as well.
And truly just celebrate and enter the space of joy, celebration, and community. I think that is what I love about.
Community is everything.
Community is everything, and that is community is something I'm really grateful for in this experience, because it's allowed us to meet so many other people from the Asian diaspora and hold space for them and truly connect with them in such an authentic level.
100.
And that is something I'm really grateful for in this journey with Eastern Honeys.
And I think in this current time and space in the world, community is more important than ever.
Period.
For so many reasons. So blessed to be part of a community, no matter where you are in the world, that has your back. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in, listening, subscribing, supporting, following, liking, all the things that make us feel so excited to be on this journey of the Eastern Honeys podcast.
Maraming salamat.
Mabuhay!